The first sign that something had gone wrong with the universe was the stars. Navigator First Class Sable noticed it the way she noticed most things. Not with alarm, not with the dramatic intake of breath that would come later from the junior officers on the bridge, but with the quiet, clinical attention of someone who had spent 11 years teaching herself to read space the way other people read text. One moment the forward viewport showed the familiar arrangement of stars in the Vethra corridor, the cold blue anchor of Pellin's star sitting at the precise 11-degree offset from the ecliptic plane where it was supposed to sit, where it had always sat, where every chart in the fleet confirmed it should be. The next moment, Pellin's star was wrong. Not gone. Not obscured. Simply wrong. Shifted perhaps 2 degrees toward the lower quadrant, the kind of shift that should have been impossible, the kind of shift that every instrument on the bridge immediately moved to correct for, assuming sensor error, assuming display calibration, assuming anything except the most disturbing possibility of all, which was that the star had not moved and the Dominion had. "Navigation," said Captain Reyes from the command chair, her voice carrying the particular flatness of a woman who had already decided that whatever was happening was serious. "Confirm position." Sable's hands were already moving across her console. She pulled the stellar cartography overlay, ran it against the inertial measurement baseline, cross-referenced with the Dominion's last confirmed fix from the Harlan beacon 47 minutes ago. The numbers came back wrong. Not slightly wrong. Not drift and error wrong. Catastrophically, impossibly, structurally wrong, as though the coordinate system itself had been folded at the corners like a piece of paper and then smoothed flat again, leaving invisible creases where the geometry no longer added up. "Captain," Sable said, "I'm reading position variance of approximately 4.7 astronomical units from last confirmed fix. In 47 minutes of standard transit at current velocity, that's..." "Impossible," said Lieutenant Commander Harwick, the senior watch officer, from his station to her left. He said it the way people say things when they mean "please tell me I'm wrong." "Yes," Sable agreed. She was already doing something else with her hands, something that would have looked, to anyone watching, like she had abandoned her instruments entirely. She had opened the bottom drawer of her navigation station, the one that most of the crew assumed contained spare interface components or emergency ration bars, and removed a flat case of the kind used to store physical documents. From it she withdrew a pad of actual paper, dense, cream-colored sheets of the kind that still came standard in survival kits, and a mechanical pencil. She set them on the edge of her console and did not use them yet. But she wanted them close. "All stations," Captain Reyes said, "report navigation status." The reports came in from the 6 escort ships in rapid succession over the fleet channel, the fast frigates Cassin and Moreau, the missile platform Ardent, the 2 destroyer-class ships Vantage and Reliant, and the electronic warfare vessel Penumbra. Every single one of them reported position variance. Every single one of them reported that their external navigation references were returning conflicting data. The Cassin reported that her autopilot had already made 3 course corrections in the last 4 minutes, attempting to reconcile stellar positions that could not be reconciled. The Ardent reported that her jump drive targeting system had locked itself out automatically, having detected an anomaly in the coordinate data that the safety protocols categorized as potential sensor failure. It was not sensor failure. Sable knew what it was approximately 90 seconds before anyone said it out loud, because she had read the intelligence briefing from Fleet Command 6 weeks ago and had, unlike most of the officers who received it, read it more than once. She had read it because it described something that frightened her in a specific and personal way, not the generalized fear of a dangerous new weapon, but the precise, pointed fear of someone who has identified the exact mechanism by which that weapon threatens them specifically. The briefing had described the Reth Collective's field generator in 3 pages of dry technical language that, stripped of its bureaucratic phrasing, said the following: the Reth had developed a technology capable of generating a localized field of spatial distortion approximately 12 to 15 astronomical units in diameter, which caused every external reference point within the field, every star, every beacon, every navigational signal, to appear displaced from its actual position by an amount that varied continuously according to a pattern that could not be predicted from inside the field. Ships inside the field could not know where they were. They could not trust their instruments. Their autopilots would make corrections that made things worse. Their jump drives would target coordinates that did not correspond to their actual position, and ships that jumped from inside the field arrived at wrong locations, sometimes fractionally wrong, sometimes catastrophically wrong, once arriving inside a moon. The briefing had described this weapon destroying 2 Terran Confederacy scout flotillas in the outer Vethra corridor 3 months ago. 14 ships. No survivors. The debris fields had been found later, widely scattered, in positions that suggested the ships had been navigating hard when they died. Frantic, desperate maneuvering in response to position data that was lying to them. The Wraith did not need to fire a single weapon. They simply waited inside their field and let human ships destroy themselves on invisible geometry. "It's the bubble," said Lieutenant Ewan from Tactical, and his voice had gone very quiet in the way voices go quiet when someone says a true thing they wish were not true. "The Wraith field generator. We're inside it." The bridge was silent for 2 full seconds. Then everyone started talking at once, and Captain Reyes let them talk for exactly 4 seconds before she said, "Quiet," in a tone that produced quiet. "Navigation," she said. "Sable. Talk to me." Sable had already picked up her pencil. "I need the crew to understand something," Sable said, and she said it loudly enough that it carried across the bridge without being a shout. She was still looking at her console, hands moving, but her voice had the quality of someone who has decided to be completely honest regardless of the reaction. "Every instrument on this ship that relies on an external reference is now wrong. Stellar cartography, wrong. Beacon triangulation, wrong. GPS analog systems, wrong. Any system that looks outside this ship to determine where this ship is receiving distorted data and cannot be trusted." She paused. "Let that land. What is not wrong," she continued, "is what's inside this ship. Our inertial measurement units are mechanical. They measure acceleration and rotation directly, without reference to anything outside the hull. Our chronometers are atomic. They measure time without reference to anything outside the hull. Our engines produce a measured and consistent thrust, which we can verify against internal instrumentation. These things have not been affected by the field." She turned around now, because she needed to see the captain's face, and she needed the captain to see hers. Reyes was a tall woman in her late 50s with a kind of angular, weathered face that came from decades of command decisions, and right now that face was doing the thing it did when Reyes was performing comm for the benefit of the bridge crew while operating something quite different underneath. "Captain," Sable said, "I can navigate this ship without external references. I can navigate all 7 ships without external references. It will require every ship in the formation to run on my calculations, and it will require those calculations to be transmitted and implemented without autopilot interpretation, because the autopilots will try to correct against external data and will make things worse. I will need each escort ship to put their navigation on pure manual, slaved to my output." Reyes looked at her for a moment. "How certain are you of this? Of the technique?" "Completely. Of the execution." Sable allowed herself one small pause. "I have never done it with 7 ships in formation over an unknown distance in an active threat environment. I have done it with 1 ship, in training exercises, over measured distances up to 9 astronomical units." She paused again. "But the math is the same. The math doesn't change with scale." What Sable was describing was dead reckoning, the oldest navigational method in human history, predating instruments, predating charts, predating the concept of a fixed reference system. Dead reckoning said, "If you know where you started, and you know how fast you have been going, and you know what direction you have been going, and you know how long you have been going, you know where you are." It was simple. It was almost embarrassingly simple. It was the kind of navigation that sailors had done on wooden ships on ancient oceans, tracking their position by watching the water flow past the hull and counting the seconds between their compass headings. It had been considered a foundational skill in early space navigation and had been systematically removed from training curricula over the past 30 years as computer navigation became not just reliable but essentially infallible. Infallible against everything except a weapon specifically designed to destroy the reliability of external references. The Wraith had, Sable thought with a kind of grim professional appreciation, done their research. "Do it," said Captain Reyes. "What do you need?" "I need Helm to give me direct control of the fleet navigation relay. I need every escort to acknowledge manual navigation mode and confirm they are cutting autopilot corrections. I need a complete readout of our engine performance data for the last 47 minutes, from the moment we hit the bubble boundary, which I am calculating was," she checked her paper, where she had already written 3 lines of figures, 11 minutes and 20 seconds before the position variance was detected on instruments. The instruments are slow to register the distortion. The distortion was already affecting us before we knew it. Reyes turned to her communications officer. "Get me the escort commanders. All 6. Now." While the channel was being opened, Sable began. She began the way she had been trained to begin, years ago, by a navigation instructor named Commodore Fatch, who was then 73 years old, and who had learned dead reckoning from someone who had learned it before computers were standard on military vessels. Fatch had believed in paper. He had believed in it with an almost religious conviction that Sable had initially found eccentric and later found, with increasing frequency, correct. Paper did not glitch. Paper did not require a power source. Paper could not be hacked, jammed, disrupted, or made to lie by a field generator 12 astronomical units across. Paper was what remained when everything else failed, and Fatch had drummed into his students the core truth of navigational mathematics. The universe is not trying to trick you. Space does not lie. Time does not lie. Velocity does not lie. If your numbers are right, they are right, and no external force can make them wrong. She wrote the time. She wrote their last confirmed position, from the Harlan beacon fix 47 minutes ago. She wrote their heading, 047 by 18 degrees declination, the heading they had been maintaining since the beginning of the transit operation. She wrote their velocity, 0.42 light speed, the standard transit speed for a carrier formation in non-hostile maneuvering space, which this space had been classified as until approximately 11 minutes ago. She wrote the engine performance figures that came in from the engineering station, consistent, clean, no anomalies, the Dominion's drives performing exactly as specified. Then she began to calculate where they were. On the fleet channel, Captain Reyes was explaining the situation to 6 escort commanders with a brisk efficiency that Sable found admirable. Commander Tesh of the Cassin asked 2 sharp questions about the reliability of the method and received 2 sharp answers. Commander Okafor of the Ardent confirmed immediately that she understood and was cutting autopilot. The others followed in sequence. The last to confirm was the Penumbra, the electronic warfare vessel, and when the Penumbra's commander, a quiet officer named Briggs who Sable had met twice at fleet briefings, confirmed his readiness, he added something else. "Captain Reyes," said Commander Briggs, "I have a specialist aboard who believes she may be able to provide limited assistance with the field disruption. She is requesting permission to speak directly with your navigation officer." Reyes looked at Sable. Sable nodded without looking up from her paper. "Put them through," Reyes said. The voice that came through was young, younger than Sable had expected, though she wasn't sure what she had expected, and it carried a particular texture that Sable recognized after a moment as the subtle harmonic quality that came from a partially non-human vocal structure. Reth biology expressed itself differently in different half-human individuals, and in this one it expressed itself in the voice. A faint, layered resonance, like 2 voices occupying the same frequency, one slightly offset from the other. "Navigator Sable," the voice said. "My name is Prex. I'm an electronic warfare specialist. I am also, by ancestry, approximately half Reth collective biological heritage, which means I have a partial intuitive understanding of how the field generator's distortion matrix operates. I cannot disrupt the field. I don't have the equipment for that, and even if I did, the generator would rebalance within seconds. But I can create windows." "Define windows," Sable said. "Localized disruptions in the distortion pattern lasting 30 to 40 seconds, in which a single external reference point, 1 star, 1 beacon, 1 signal, briefly appears in its correct position. I can't choose which reference point. I can only force the field to, essentially, blink, in a way that temporarily corrects one data stream. During those 30 to 40 seconds, you would have one accurate external reading." Sable stopped writing. She stared at her paper for a moment, not seeing it, performing a rapid internal calculation that had nothing to do with numbers. "How often can you open a window?" she said. "Once every 90 to 120 minutes, Prex said. "The process is physically taxing. I will be honest with you about that. It is not without cost." "Understood." Sable resumed writing. "One accurate reading every 90 to 120 minutes. Here is what I need you to understand about those windows. When one opens, I will have 30 to 40 seconds to take a complete navigational reading and incorporate it into my calculations. A complete reading means confirm the identity of the reference point, determine its precise angular position as measured from our actual current location, cross-reference that measurement against the dead reckoning position I have calculated, determine the variance, and use the variance to correct my ongoing calculation. If my dead reckoning is working correctly, the variance will be small. If it is large, I will need to understand why before I can correct it. All of that happens in 30 to 40 seconds. There was a pause. That is very fast, Prex said. Yes, Sable agreed. It is. Can you give me advance warning before a window opens? Even 10 seconds. I can give you approximately 15 seconds of warning. The disruption I create produces a measurable precursor signal in the field harmonics. I can detect that signal in my own output and warn you. Then we have a system, Sable said. Stay on this channel. She went back to her calculations. The situation had become clear in the way situations in combat always became clear, not by getting better, but by becoming defined. They were inside a Reth field approximately 13 astronomical units in diameter, based on the intelligence briefing specifications. They did not know where inside the field they were, at the center, at the edge, somewhere between. They did not know which direction the edge was. They did not know how fast the field was moving, though the intelligence briefing had said that the field generator ship had to move slowly to maintain bubble integrity, no more than 0.15 light speed, significantly slower than the Dominion and her escorts at standard transit speed. This meant that if they moved fast, they could exit the field. The question was which direction to move. Which was, of course, exactly the question that Dead Reckoning was designed to answer. The first 90 minutes were the worst, and they were the worst because nothing happened. Nothing happening meant no windows, no corrections, no confirmation that Sable's calculations were right. It meant 9 officers on a carrier bridge watching their navigation console display numbers generated by a human being with a pencil and a pad of paper instead of numbers generated by the most sophisticated navigational computer that the Terran Confederacy's engineering corps had ever built. It meant 6 escort ships running on manual headings relayed from the Dominion's navigation station, their own computers locked to Sable's output, their own autopilot suppressed, their own navigation officers' monitoring systems that were deliberately prevented from doing the things those systems were designed to do. It meant flying blind. Sable did not find it the worst. She found it intensely, almost painfully focused, the kind of focus that narrowed the entire universe down to the numbers in front of her. She had 3 sheets of paper filled by the 45-minute mark, their running position, updated every 10 minutes, their heading and velocity, confirmed from engineering every 15, the accumulated error estimate, which she recalculated each time she updated the position, maintaining a range within which she was confident the Dominion actually existed even if not at the precise calculated point. She was a navigator who thought in terms of probability, not certainty, and she had taught herself to carry error forward honestly, never pretending her numbers were better than they were. Their position range at 45 minutes was acceptable. At 60 minutes it was still acceptable, though broader. At 80 minutes it was beginning to concern her, not because the numbers were wrong, but because accumulated small errors in Dead Reckoning always grew over time, and without a correction point to reset against, the honest range of possible positions was expanding. She needed the window. Prex, she said on the open channel, her voice level. Status. 12 minutes, came the reply. Prex's voice sounded, to Sable's ear, slightly rougher than it had an hour ago. Slightly strained. I can feel the harmonics building. 15 minutes maximum before I can generate the disruption. Copy. I'll be ready. On the tactical display, the one that was still functioning correctly, since tactical only needed to know where things were relative to the ship, not in absolute coordinates, Lieutenant Ewan had been tracking what he could. The Reth fleet. Or rather, the signatures of the Reth fleet, since inside the bubble the specific data on their positions was distorted the same way everything else was. But the fact of their presence was not in question. There were drive signatures, the characteristic paired harmonic output of Reth fleet drives, positioned, approximately, roughly, imprecisely, somewhere behind the Dominion and her escorts. The Reth were following. Of course they were following. The field generator moved with its fleet. The fleet moved with the field. They were shepherding the human ships through the distorted space, waiting for errors. How close are they? Captain Reyes asked Ewan. Hard to say with accuracy. The field distorts the drive signature data the same way it distorts everything else. My best estimate is 4 to 7 astronomical units behind us. But that's a wide range. And if we slow down, they close faster. If we speed up, we exit the bubble faster, Sable said from her station, without looking up, but we accumulate positional error faster too, because velocity times time is the core of my calculation, and if we push beyond 0.42, I need to compensate for relativistic corrections that become non-trivial above 0.5. She made a small mark on her paper. I recommend we hold current velocity. The bubble boundary at its widest is approximately 6 to 7 astronomical units ahead of us at our current heading, based on our entry point and the known field diameter. At 0.42, we reach the boundary in approximately 4 hours and 20 minutes from now. And the Wraith fleet? If they're 4 astronomical units behind us and moving at 0.15, they fall further behind. If they're 7 astronomical units behind us at 0.15, they fall further behind faster. Sable paused. The problem is not the Wraith fleet catching us. The problem is navigational error causing us to turn the wrong direction and extend the transit, or worse, to emerge from the bubble at the wrong location and be unable to call for assistance. Then we trust your calculations. Yes, Sable said. You do. The window opened at 89 minutes. Precursor's signal. Prex's voice came in sharp and immediate. 15 seconds. I don't know which reference the field chooses, I only force the aperture. Sable's pencil was already up. Her instruments were already configured, 3 separate measurement arrays set to capture angular position data the instant a true reading became available. She had been configuring them for the past 4 minutes while running the rest of her calculation on paper, allocating attention the way a musician allocates fingers across a keyboard. 12 seconds, Prex said. The voice now had a quality in it that Sable categorized as pain, or something adjacent to pain, the sound of a body doing something it found costly. She filed that away without dwelling on it. 10. On her instruments, the stellar cartography display, which had been showing a continuous low-level chaos of conflicting data, stars jittering across positions that should have been fixed, flickered. 1 point stabilized. Just one, while everything around it continued its false drift. 1 cold blue star, sitting in a precise and definite position, perfectly still while the distorted universe shifted around it. Pellin's star. The same anchor she had noticed when this began, now returned, briefly, to truth. Window open, Prex said, and there was something rough and ragged at the edges of it. 30 seconds. Go. Sable went. The angular position. She read it in the first 3 seconds, 3 separate instruments confirming a single measurement to 6 decimal places. Pellin's star, as seen from the Dominion's current position, at a precise bearing that told her, the moment she had it, almost everything she needed to know. She was already calculating the triangulation before the reading was complete, the known absolute position of Pellin's star, fixed in the galaxy's coordinate system regardless of any field distortion, versus its apparent position from here, giving her the line of position. 1 star gave her a line, not a point. A line was enough. Because she had the line from Dead Reckoning already. That was the mathematics that made this work, the thing that Commodore Fatch had spent 6 months drilling into his students with the patience of someone teaching a complicated dance. Dead Reckoning gave you a calculated position, not perfect, increasingly uncertain over time, but a position. An external fix gave you a line, not a point, but a line, a direction from the known object to the observer. Where the Dead Reckoning position and the line of position intersected, or came closest to intersecting, that was where you were. The fix corrected the Dead Reckoning. The Dead Reckoning made the fix meaningful. Together, they gave you something better than either alone. She had the measurement. She had the Dead Reckoning. She had, in the 20-second mark of a 30 to 40-second window, a corrected position. The variance from her Dead Reckoning was 0.23 astronomical units. Small. Beautifully small. Her accumulated error had stretched the uncertainty range in the right ascension axis, and the fix collapsed it back down, but the center of her calculated position was only 23 cents from where the fix said she actually was. In 9 hours of transit, navigating without external references in a distorted space environment with a following fleet and 6 ships depending on her numbers, she had been wrong by less than a quarter of an astronomical unit. She wrote the corrected position. She updated her heading recommendation by 1.2 degrees. She transmitted the correction to all 6 escorts on the fleet channel. Window closing, Prex said. Pellin's star jittered, shifted, slid back into its false position as the field reasserted itself. The cartography display returned to its meaningless chaos. The universe went back to lying. Good window, Sable said. Thank you, Prex. Rest. There was a pause on the channel and then a short sound that might have been a quiet laugh. Navigator Sable. You sound like you've done this before. I have, Sable said. But not like this. She went back to her calculations. The next 2 hours were better than the first 90 minutes, which was not the same as being easy. They were better because Sable now had a confirmed fix, a corrected baseline, a compressed error range. She pushed the calculation forward with a cleaner confidence. Not certainty, never certainty, but the particular kind of controlled professional assurance that comes from knowing your method has been validated. The math is right. The position is real. The ship is where she says it is. At the 2-hour mark after the first window, Lieutenant Ewan reported a change in the Reth drive signatures. They're accelerating, he said. Not alarmed, exactly. Ewan had the emotional texture of someone who had decided that the appropriate response to alarming information was to present it as cleanly as possible and let others decide how to feel about it. Drive output has increased, I'd estimate, by 30%. They're closing. How close? Reyes asked. Still within the error range on my position data. Could be 3 astronomical units. Could be 5. Sable. I heard it, Sable said. We are approximately 3 hours and 10 minutes from the bubble boundary at current velocity. If they have increased speed to 0.2, they close at a rate of... She did the calculation in her head first, then wrote it down, because written numbers were real numbers. 0.27 AU per hour relative to us, if they're at the near end of UN's range. They reach weapons range of our slowest escort in approximately 4 hours if they're at the near end of UN's range. Which is 20 minutes after we exit the bubble, Reyes said. Yes, Sable said. If my calculations are correct. They are correct, Reyes said. It was not a question. Sable allowed herself the small luxury of pausing before she answered. I need the second window, she said. I need the correction. Then I can tell you they're correct. Prex had been quiet on the channel for 2 hours, and when Sable requested status, the reply came back with a measured, careful quality, as though each word was being placed precisely. I can generate the disruption in approximately 40 minutes, Prex said. It will take more effort than the first one. I understand, Sable said. 40 minutes is acceptable. Tell me when you have the precursor. Copy. The 40 minutes passed in silence that was not quite silence. The ambient sounds of a carrier bridge in high alert, the low hum of consoles and the periodic quiet exchanges between officers' monitoring systems, the constant soft sound of the ship's drives, which were the most honest sound on the ship, the sound of consistent velocity, faithful and mechanical and indifferent to the distorted geometry around them. Sable wrote numbers. She updated the running position. She recalculated the heading twice, not because it had changed, but because recalculation was discipline, recalculation was making sure. At the 37-minute mark, Harwick spoke quietly from beside her. He had been watching her work for most of the transit, standing slightly behind her station with the particular stillness of an officer who had decided that the most useful thing he could do was stay out of the way. Your calculations, he said. The error range. You keep compressing it. Each calculation cycle updates the error estimate, Sable said. The range narrows as time passes and the numbers remain consistent with themselves. It's statistical. The longer the dead reckoning remains internally coherent, the more confident I can be that the foundational measurements are clean. So right now I believe we are within half an astronomical unit of our calculated position. After the next window, I will believe we are within a quarter. Harwick was quiet for a moment. You know what you're doing, he said. It came out more like a statement of surprised discovery than a compliment, which Sable found she preferred. Yes, she said. I do. The Reth fleet was running hard now. At the 4-hour mark after they had entered the bubble, Lieutenant Ewan's report had a different quality. Less neutral. The numbers had moved past the range of uncertainty and into something he could read with reasonable confidence even through the distorted drive signature data, because the Reth ships were close enough now that even distorted data carried meaningful information. 3 to 4 astronomical units, he said. Closing at 0.35 relative. Navigator, at that rate. I know, Sable said. The second window had come in at the 3-hour and 15-minute mark, and it had been harder. She had heard it in Prex's voice. The 15-second warning delivered with a strained precision that told her the person on the other end of the channel was operating at the edge of capacity, burning through physical reserves to maintain focus. The window had been slightly shorter, 28 seconds instead of 35. The reference point had been a beacon, the automated navigation beacon at the Harlan station, which they had passed 47 minutes before the bubble hit them, now briefly visible through Prex's disruption at an angular position that told Sable exactly where she was relative to where she had been. The variance from dead reckoning had been 0.31 astronomical units. Slightly larger than the first correction. Expected, the second transit segment had been longer, the accumulated error slightly greater. Still acceptably small. Still a validation of the method. She had updated the course. She had confirmed the heading to the bubble boundary. She had transmitted the corrections to the escorts. She had not told the escort commanders how close the Wraith fleet was getting. That was Reyes's communication to manage, not hers. Her communication was numbers. But now the numbers were becoming urgent. 2 hours 50 minutes to the boundary, she said. At their current closing rate, they reach effective weapons range of the Cassin and Moreau, the fastest frigates, running at the flanks of the formation, the ships most exposed to a following attacker, in approximately 2 hours 40 minutes. 10-minute margin, Reyes said. 10 minutes. Sable paused, made a small mark on her paper. With a navigational error margin of, she calculated, honestly, without rounding favorably, plus or minus 22 minutes. The bridge absorbed this in silence. So there's a scenario in which they reach us before we exit, Reyes said. There is. What can we do about the timeline? Increase velocity, Sable said. I have been conservative at 0.42 because of the relativistic correction requirements. If we push to 0.5, I can manage the corrections, but the dead reckoning error rate increases faster and the boundary position becomes less precise. We would exit the bubble sooner, but with less certainty about where we exit. Does where we exit matter? We exit the bubble, the field distortion ends, we have real navigation again. Where we exit matters because of what is on the other side, Sable said. At the bubble boundary position I have calculated, we emerge into open space approximately 2 AU from the Vethera shipping corridor. There are relay stations there. There are patrol routes. I can send a distress signal the moment we clear the field and have a response within 40 minutes. She paused. If we exit at the wrong position, if the boundary is not where I calculated it is, we might emerge into obstacle space. Into the gravity well of an uncharted body. Into a shipping corridor at transit speed without transponders active. Or we emerge in a position where we have to travel additional distance to reach help, and in that additional distance, the Wraith fleet, which will be right behind us at the boundary. Would they cross the boundary? Harwick asked. Into human space? The intelligence briefing says no, Reyes said. The Wraith have been consistent about not operating their military assets inside the recognized human space boundary. It's the one thing that's kept this from becoming a full declared war. She looked at Sable. Do you believe the briefing? I believe, Sable said carefully, that the Wraith have been consistent. I do not believe that consistency should be the margin we're relying on. Reyes made a decision the way she made all decisions, quickly and completely, without visible hesitation. We stay at 0.42. We maintain your calculated heading. We trust your numbers. She turned to the communications station. Open the fleet channel. I'm going to tell the escort commanders what we're looking at. While Reyes spoke to the fleet, Sable did something she had not done yet in 4 hours of continuous calculation. She stopped. She put her pencil down. She looked at her hands. They were steady. They had been steady for 4 hours, through 9 pages of calculations, through 2 windows with their specific and narrow intensity, through the growing awareness of the Wraith fleet behind them and the boundary ahead. Her hands were steady because steadiness was not a feeling, it was a discipline, and she had spent 11 years building it the way other people built muscle, through use, through repetition, through the accumulated weight of all the time she had made herself be steady when she did not feel steady. The math did not care how she felt. The math was either right or wrong, and feeling frightened would not make it wrong and feeling steady would not make it right. The math stood on its own, indifferent to the emotional weather around it. She picked up her pencil and updated the running position. At the 4-hour 30-minute mark, Commander Briggs of the Penumbra opened a side channel. Navigator Sable, he said. I need to tell you something about Prex. Go ahead. She's been in her equipment bay for 4 hours running active electromagnetic counterinterference operations in a field environment she can partially feel. Her Reth heritage gives her a biological sensitivity to the field harmonics. It's not metaphorical. The field is actively affecting her physiology. The second window took more out of her than she let on. Sable stared at her paper for a moment. Can she open a third window? A pause. She says yes. I am saying, I don't know. I need the third window, Sable said. I need it in approximately 60 minutes, when we are within 90 minutes of the calculated boundary. One more fix will give me certainty on the exit position to within, she calculated. 1/10 of an astronomical unit. That precision is the difference between emerging where I planned and emerging somewhere ambiguous. Another pause. Longer. I'll tell her, Briggs said. On the tactical display, the Reth drive signatures were bright and close, the distorted data still carrying uncertainty, but with uncertainty now concentrated around specific values rather than spread across a wide range. They were there. They were real. They were coming. Sable calculated the rate of closure again, not because she needed to, but because she wanted the number in front of her, written and solid and honest. She wrote it in the margin of page 9, Reth closure, 35 cents per hour. Time to weapons range, 2 hours 15 minutes. Time to boundary, 2 hours 40 minutes. She drew a line under both numbers. The margin was 25 minutes now. It had been 10 minutes an hour ago. She had gained 15 minutes of margin in the last hour. She looked at the calculation. She did it again from first principles, checking herself, assuming nothing, trusting only the steps. The same answer. The margin was real. Ewan, she said, has the Reth closure rate changed in the last 30 minutes? Ewan checked his data. Marginally decreased, I think. 0.33 rather than 0.35. Hard to be certain. They may have reached maximum safe velocity for the field generator ship, Sable said. The field generator limits their formation speed. If the generator is already at maximum, they cannot close faster than they are closing now. That's good news, Harwick said. It is consistent with an exit margin of approximately 25 minutes, Sable said. Which is not the same as comfortable, but it is not as bad as it was an hour ago. She updated page 10. 55 minutes later, the precursor signal came. Navigator Sable. Prex's voice on the channel was different now. Not rough, exactly, controlled, but with the quality of control that is maintained by active effort rather than comfortable baseline. Precursor signal present. Approximately 15 seconds. I want to tell you, a brief pause, just long enough to be meaningful. This one is harder. I will hold it as long as I can. Do what you need to do fast. I will, Sable said. She had been ready for 20 minutes. Instruments configured, pencil in hand, the dead reckoning position precisely current, updated 60 seconds ago. Prex. Whatever it takes to hold that window open, don't burn yourself out for it. If you lose it early, we manage. You hear me? A short pause. I hear you. 15 seconds, Sable said. Here we go. The window opened. It was dimmer than the previous two, not in any optical sense, since what she was receiving was instrument data, not light, but the data itself was less clean, the distortion-free signal carrying more residual noise than the first two windows had produced. Whatever Prex was doing to hold it open was working, but working at the edge of its precision. The reference point was a distant pulsar, catalogued and precisely mapped, its angular position from any point in the Vethera corridor calculable to high accuracy. Sable read the position in 4 seconds. Drew the line of position in the next 3. Intersected it with her dead reckoning in the 2 after that. Variance, 0.18 astronomical units. She barely breathed. 0.18. Tighter than the previous 2 corrections. Not because the dead reckoning had improved, it was the same method, the same accumulated uncertainty, but because this correction came at the best possible moment, close to the boundary, when the precision of the exit position mattered most. She wrote the corrected position. She calculated the bubble boundary. She updated the heading. Window holding, Prex said, and now the voice was very much the voice of someone standing at the limit of something, measured and precise and thin at the edges. Take what you need. I have it, Sable said immediately. "Close the window. Right now. I have everything." The window closed. The pulsar shifted away into its distorted false position. The field reasserted. Sable wrote the boundary position on page 11 with slow, deliberate strokes. She drew a circle around it. Then she calculated the heading one final time, updating for the corrected position, and wrote the course to the boundary, 321 by 14 degrees declination, a change of 2.3 degrees from their current heading, threading them precisely toward the exit point she had identified. "Fleet," she said on the open channel. "New heading. 321 by 14. Implement immediately on my mark." She checked that all 6 escorts were showing attention confirmation on the relay. They were. Mark. 7 ships turned 2.3 degrees in the darkness of distorted space. 88 minutes to the boundary. The last 88 minutes were the longest minutes Sable had ever experienced, which was a claim she made precisely and with full awareness of her previous long minutes, of which there had been several. The longest minute she had previously experienced was the 90 seconds it had taken for search and rescue to reach a survival pod she had occupied for 3 days after the Meridian was lost at the Battle of Vethra Approach, 3 years ago. Those 90 seconds had been very long. These were longer. Not because of fear. She was not, she thought, afraid in the conventional sense. The physical symptoms were present, the elevated pulse and the particular attention of a body that knows it is in danger, but she was not operating out of fear. She was operating out of precision. The fear, to whatever extent it existed, was fuel, and it burned clean. She updated the running position every 10 minutes. She recalculated the heading every 15. She checked the error estimate every 5, watching it compress as the consistent self-coherence of the calculation accumulated weight. The math was good. The math had been good for 6 hours and 47 minutes. It would be good for 88 more minutes, and then it would not matter whether it was good or not, because they would be out. At 60 minutes to the boundary, Ewan said, the Wraith fleet has changed formation. Every head on the bridge turned toward tactical. They're not accelerating, Ewan said quickly. Formation change only. They've spread out, wider dispersion, which actually increases their separation from us. But, he paused, studying his display. The formation change looks like they're preparing to stop at a line. The bubble boundary, Reyes said, has to be. They know where the boundary is. They're a 0.14 light speed right now and decelerating. They'll reach the boundary exactly when we do, approximately, and they'll stop there. The bridge absorbed this quietly. They're not going to follow us out, said Lieutenant Jansen from communications, young enough that surprise was still audible in her voice. No, Reyes said. They're not. Sable kept writing. At 40 minutes to the boundary, she did something she had not done since the beginning of the transit. She stopped calculating and read back through everything she had written. All 11 pages, front and back, dense with figures. Starting position. Initial heading. Velocity at transit speed. The accumulated position updates, each one building on the last. The error estimates, compressing and then briefly expanding when the error accumulated and then compressing again after each window correction. The 3 window fixes, each one noted in the margin with the time, the reference point, the angular reading, the line of position, the variance from dead reckoning, the corrected position. The heading adjustments, 3 of them, small ones, each justified by a specific calculation she could point to and explain. She read it the way she would have read a document she was about to sign, looking for errors, looking for places where she had been lazy or had assumed rather than calculated. She found one place where she had made an arithmetic error in the error estimate, a small transposition, 2 digits swapped, which had produced a slightly too optimistic range. She corrected it. The corrected range was still acceptable. The conclusion did not change. The math was right. She set the pages down and looked at the boundary heading. At 20 minutes to the boundary, the 6 escort commanders came on the fleet channel, one by one, without being asked, and confirmed their navigation status. Not because there was anything new to report, but because it was the thing people do when they are 20 minutes from the end of something terrible. They check in. They confirm that the others are still there. Casson confirms. Moreau confirms. Ardent confirms. Vantage and Reliant confirm together, their commanders having apparently decided that the moment called for joint brevity. Last of all, Penumbra confirms, and Commander Briggs added one sentence, Prex is resting. She would like Navigator Sable to know that she is confident in the numbers. Sable felt something move in her chest that was not fear and not relief and not quite either of the things between them. "Tell her the numbers are good," she said. "At 10 minutes to the boundary," Captain Reyes said. "Sable, what do we do when we cross?" "The instant we cross, every instrument that relies on external references will begin returning accurate data," Sable said. "The stellar cartography will stabilize within seconds. Our actual position will appear on the navigation display within 60 to 90 seconds as the system reacquires and triangulates. At that point, I will confirm whether the exit position matches my calculations, and I will transmit a distress call to the Harlan relay station with our position and status." "And if the exit position doesn't match?" Sable thought about this for a moment. "It will match," she said. "Or it will be close enough that the Harlan relay is still the right call." "How close is close enough?" "Half an astronomical unit." "And how confident are you that we're within half an astronomical unit of your exit position?" Sable looked at page 11. At the boundary coordinates she had drawn a circle around, the circle that represented the compressed error range of 11 pages of calculation, 3 external fixes, 6 hours and 50 minutes of continuous dead reckoning navigation. One half-Reth specialist on an escort ship who had spent 3 sessions burning through her biological reserves to pry open 30-second windows in the fabric of a weapon designed to destroy human ships. "Very confident," she said. "That's not a number," Reyes said, and there was something in her voice that Sable recognized after a moment as the particular warmth that hides inside professional directness. 93%, Sable said. "Within half an AU. 97% within 1 AU. Which still puts the Harlan relay within range." "Good enough," Reyes said. 5 minutes. Sable capped her pencil. She looked at the boundary heading. She looked at the clock. She looked at the distance remaining, which she had been calculating from her running position against her boundary coordinates, watching the number decrease minute by minute as they covered the ground she had calculated for them to cover. 47 cents to boundary. 0.38. 0.29. On the tactical display, the Reth formation was visible now with a clarity that the earlier distorted data had not provided. They were close enough that even the field's interference could not entirely obscure them. 9 ships. Large ones. Running hard at the edge of their safe envelope and decelerating toward the boundary, a fleet that had hunted a human carrier group through distorted space for 9 hours and now slowed at the kill line they had drawn for themselves, the line that marked the limit of their patience with the political reality of the war they were not quite fighting. 9 ships, bright on tactical, slowing to a stop at the wall of the bubble they had built. 19 cents. 0.11. 0.06. "All stations," Captain Reyes said. "Stand by." 3 cents. 0.01. The Dominion crossed the boundary. Sable knew it the way you know a held breath released, not through a single instrument but through all of them simultaneously. The navigation console's quiet chaos suddenly resolving like a shaken snow globe settling, the stellar cartography overlay stabilizing from its 9-hour fever dream into perfect, unambiguous certainty, each star sitting in exactly the position it was supposed to sit in. The universe telling the truth again after 9 hours of systematic lying. The inertial data and the external data, which had been irreconcilably contradictory since the moment the bubble hit them, clicked into agreement with each other. Small mechanical sound, like a lock engaging. The navigation display woke up. It woke up the way it always did when acquiring a fresh position fix, a brief cascade of calculations, the system triangulating from multiple sources simultaneously, and then the coordinates appeared, clean and definite, at the center of the display. Real coordinates. Real position. Real, actual, verified location in space. Sable read them. Her hand was perfectly steady. The exit position was 0.19 astronomical units from her calculated boundary coordinates. 19 cents. Inside the half AU window she had predicted. Inside the quarter AU window she had hoped for, quietly, without saying so. The Harlan relay station was 1.87 astronomical units away. The relay would have a response to a distress call in approximately 42 minutes. They were not in obstacle space. They were not in a shipping corridor. They were in open transit space, exactly where she had put them. Behind them, at the bubble boundary, the Reth fleet stopped. On the tactical display, 9 Reth drive signatures reduced their output simultaneously, not to zero, but to station keeping, the thrust signature of ships that were maintaining position rather than pursuing. They sat at the boundary like dogs at a fence, watching the human ships emerge into the space that the human ships had decided was theirs. They did not cross. On the communication station, Lieutenant Jansen was already transmitting the distress call, her voice careful and professional as she read the position coordinates that the navigation display had given her, the coordinates that matched what Sable had written on page 11 of 11 pages of dead reckoning calculations, give or take 19 cents, which in 9 hours of blind navigation through a field weapon designed to destroy human ships was a margin so small as to be, by any reasonable measure, extraordinary. The fleet channel erupted. All 6 escorts confirmed crossing the boundary, each one reporting good instrument data, real coordinates, external navigation restored. Commander Tesh of the Cassin said something that was not a regulation status report and was not entirely appropriate for open fleet channels and was, under the circumstances, completely understandable. Commander Okafor of the Ardent simply said, "We're clear," 3 times in a row, quickly, as though confirming it to herself. Commander Briggs of the Penumbra said, "Prex asks if we made it." "Tell her we made it," Sable said. "Tell her the exit variance was .19 AU. A pause. Then Briggs again, and there was something in his voice that had not been there for 9 hours. "She says that's a good number." "It's a very good number," Sable said. The applause started somewhere in the middle of the bridge. Sable did not look up to see who started it. It spread quickly, the way things spread in enclosed spaces under high pressure when the pressure suddenly releases, not slowly, not building, but immediately present, as though the sound had been waiting behind a door. Officers at their stations, the helm crew, the engineering liaison who had been standing at the back of the bridge for 2 hours with a tablet of engine performance data in case Sable needed it. Someone in the corridor outside, which meant the sound had already moved beyond the bridge. Captain Reyes did not applaud. She stood from her command chair and walked to the navigation station and stood behind it, looking at the navigation display, at the real coordinates that corresponded exactly to the position Sable had written on a piece of paper with a mechanical pencil in the first minutes after the bubble hit. Then she looked at Sable. 9 hours, Reyes said. 8 hours, 54 minutes, Sable said. Reyes made a small sound that might have been a laugh. 8 hours, 54 minutes of continuous dead reckoning navigation, 7 ships in formation, active threat environment, without external references. "And 3 windows," Sable said. "I had help." "You had 30-second windows," Reyes said. "Once an hour and a half. You had everything else." Sable looked at the navigation display for a moment. Real coordinates. Real stars in their right positions. Pellin's star sitting at its precise 11 degrees from the ecliptic, where it had always sat, where it would always sit. The Reth fleet, visible now on tactical with perfect clarity, 9 ships in their formation at the bubble boundary, 3.31 astronomical units behind them, exactly where they could not go. She looked at her pages. 11 pages, front and back of most of them, covered in her precise, small handwriting. The initial position. The heading. The velocity. The updates, every 10 minutes, the running account of where she had calculated they were. The error estimates. The window fixes in their margins. The boundary coordinates with a circle drawn around them. The final heading, 321 by 14 degrees declination, the course she had set for them in the last 90 minutes when the Reth fleet was closing and the math had to be right. She stacked the pages carefully. She aligned the edges. She folded them once, lengthwise, and then again, crosswise, reducing them to a rectangle that fit in her jacket's interior pocket. "You're keeping them," Hawick said. He had been standing behind her station again, as he had been for most of the transit. "Yes," Sable said. "As a souvenir." She considered this. A trophy implied something about the thing you had overcome, a monster, an adversary, something that had earned its danger by being formidable. The bubble had been formidable. The Reth fleet had been formidable. But what she was keeping was not the evidence of their defeat. She was keeping something else. "No," she said. "As a reminder." Harwick waited. "They removed dead reckoning from the standard training curriculum 31 years ago," Sable said. "They removed it because they decided that computer navigation was reliable enough that a backup method wasn't worth the training time. They removed it because no one could imagine a scenario in which external navigation references would become systematically untrustworthy. She patted her pocket. Today was that scenario. The navigation display in front of her was bright with real data, position updating in real time, stellar cartography locked and clean, the Harlan relay station's beacon pinging reliably at $1.87. All the systems that had been useless for 9 hours were useless no longer, and the universe of reliable instruments had reasserted itself around the simple fact of 11 pages of handwritten mathematics that had been right. 31 years, she said. And it took 9 hours for someone to build a weapon that made it essential again. She looked at her pocket. The skills that seem obsolete are the ones they haven't built the weapon for yet. You don't know which ones you'll need until the day you need them, and by then it's too late to learn. She put her hand over the pocket for a moment. Not a dramatic gesture, just a confirmation of presence, the way you check a pocket to make sure something important is still there. I'll need them to think about that, she said. At Fleet Command. I'll need someone to take the training curriculum apart and look at what else they decided wasn't worth keeping, and ask whether they'd still think so if someone clever enough built the right weapon. She turned back to her console. The real, honest, uncorrupted console, full of true data, reliable instruments, the comforting precision of a navigation system that currently knew exactly where it was. But that's a conversation for later. On the communications station, Lieutenant Jansen confirmed that the Harlan relay had received their distress call and was dispatching a response escort. 42 minutes. In 42 minutes there would be friendly ships, and after 42 minutes would come the reporting, the debrief, the careful formal language of after-action documentation that would try to put 9 hours of blind navigation into the specific gravity of official record. There would be questions about the bubble weapon, about the Wraith fleet's behavior, about the 3 windows and the woman aboard the Penumbra who had opened them at personal cost, about what the Terran Confederacy intended to do now that the weapon's capabilities had been demonstrated on a fleet-sized target and survived. Those were all later questions. Right now Sable opened a new position log on her console, a clean one, the digital kind, the kind that updated automatically from the real navigation data pouring in from the restored instrument suite, and began to enter the final confirmed exit position. 19 cents variance. She entered that too, in the notes field, where it would go into the permanent navigation record of the transit, official and indelible. Dead reckoning variance from calculated exit position, 0.19 astronomical units. She entered the transit time, 8 hours, 54 minutes. She entered the navigator of record, Sable, Navigation Officer First Class, TSC Dominion. She submitted the log. Outside the viewport, Pellin's star sat at exactly 11 degrees from the ecliptic, cold and blue and perfectly, permanently, honestly still, indifferent to the 9 hours in which a weapon had tried to make it lie, indifferent to the ships that had navigated by it and around it and finally back to it, indifferent to everything except the simple fact of being exactly where it had always been. Stars did not move on human timescales. They were reliable in the deep way that only very large things moving very slowly could be reliable. You could build mathematics on them. You could trust them the way Sable trusted the numbers she had built on them, layer after layer, correction after correction, through 9 hours of distorted space and a closing fleet and a woman on an escort ship who had opened 3 windows in the dark. The Wraith fleet held its position at the boundary. 3.31 astronomical units. Not moving. Watching the human ships pull away. Sable turned back to her console and began to plot the course home.